All right. Hey, y'all. I'm going to be talking about this for the next couple weeks. So, dues. So, this year they're discounted. So, it's $60 until October 13th, $75 with a t shirt bundle. I'll show you right here. Venmo at OUPRSSA or email me if you have to pay by check. Scan this QR code and you'll be taken right to the form, and you must be a dues paying member if you are on a committee. Also, I'll send the link in the chat.
We'll also get that link sent in the recap email that comes out either tonight or tomorrow morning. That way you guys have it. I'm sure Claire will post it on social media as well. So it's easily accessible for everybody. Virtual icon, Pritch or Rachel Metzler, tag in if I miss anything, but it's a super great deal this year for students. It's $159 for full access. With that, you're getting the full access that professionals are also getting, which they're paying close to $900 for, and we're getting it for $159 as students. You're going to get one-on-one networking opportunities with industry professionals, as well as all the general sessions. There's 5 general sessions across the 4 days that you can attend, plus lots of breakout sessions as well. And Rachel Melser said that there may possibly be a line dancing class. Everybody put your boots on and get excited for that.
Yes, we were supposed to be in Nashville, so we're trying to bring some of that Nashville flair back. And I would also just reiterate, this is not like you're sitting on a Zoom call all day. It's a very interactive platform. The platform that we're using, I can't really talk too much about it yet, but it's really awesome, and you are not going to want to miss it. And they're doing such a good job with kind of being able to connect you to these professionals to really be able to still jumpstart your networking and career opportunities. Even though we are virtual, and because we have that access to PRSA, it is such a big deal that we are able to offer this for such a low price comparatively. And you don't have to travel anywhere. You can do it from literally wherever you are. So super excited. I hope all of you come and participate in ICON.
Yeah, now ICON is really fun because we get to travel as a group. There's bonding that goes on, you stay in a hotel and get to talk after the events and get to meet people face to face. But this is absolutely incredible because we have the entirety of the PRSSA conference available to us and in an event like no other. Yeah, it's challenging, and that's the way that we ended up having to do it. But I'm telling you, this is going to be an event that you are not going to want to miss. And at $159, it's pennies.
Yeah, normally it would cost much more than that to attend, plus all your travel and that. And you may be looking at the dates and say, well, some of those are on weekdays. Pritch is going to take care of us and make sure we get notes to get out of class so we can further our professional network and our knowledge of the PR industry.
Yeah, and the nice thing, if you remember the very first meeting we had most of our PR professors on the meeting, and they are very, very supportive of your professional development. So I don't see a conflict as long as you can let me give them some advance notice. I think this is going to be a spectacular event that you must participate in.
Super excited. All of exec's going to be able to attend, and we're really excited to learn learn things and apply them back to our chapter. And we want all of you to have that same opportunity. Tonight's speaker, super excited to have Brian Price with us. Pritch knows Brian really well. He can probably give a better introduction than I can. So I'll let Pritch introduce him.
Oh, you hoser. I was going to make you do the work. Well, I have known Brian for a while. I'll let him tell the story about how we met, but he was on the national committee. I was just coming in as the national faculty advisor, and we got to know each other and bonded. And he ultimately ended up as the PRSSA national president in 2013. He is a senior counsel for the National Board of Directors, so that's kind of a big deal. People want to hear Brian's input from his perspective, and this is our age group that he's helping educate the old farts like me, and has moved on through several very important positions, and is now at Axis Capital in Chicago. And without further ado, Brian, I am so glad that you joined us tonight. Everybody pay attention. This man knows what he's talking about.
Hey everybody, that's quite the introduction, Prish. Thank you very much. It's really cool that I get to be here with all of you. I know that I'm doing like Zoom meetings. By the way, I'm stalling while I pull up my presentation a little bit. But you know that Zoom meetings aren't new in PRSSA, and a lot of chapters have been doing them for a long time to bring in a guest speaker like this. But it definitely opens up your options when you're 100% Zoom to get someone you know, who's not in the market, who's not a short drive away, to come and be a part of your chapter meeting. And for me, it is definitely exciting, and I'll even say an honor to be here with PRSSA. It's been a while since I joined a chapter meeting, so this is a lot of fun for me. I haven't given my presentation like a dry run. I didn't practice it in front of the mirror or anything. So, you know, it's just going to be a kind of a casual conversation. I'm going to try to end a little bit early and have time for a lot of questions. I mean, I can assume some of the things that you're probably interested in. I mean, I was in your shoes about 7 years ago, you know, when I was like going through being like an upperclassman in college, for probably a lot of you are. Some of the issues are a little bit timeless. But at the same time, you know, I've got kind of a diverse background, and I've worked in corporate, I've worked in agency. I've had different kinds of small internships, big internships, summer agency internships. We can talk about that process. I went to grad school right after undergrad. I can talk about my thought process as to why, things like that. So I want to save time for questions. Hopefully we do so. And I'm yours as long as there are people who still want to ask questions tonight. So that is sort of me. And as Pritch mentioned in my intro, I work at Axis Capital. And I'm a global communications business partner. We've got some weird titles, but it's sort of, you know, a title that's sort of business partner. It's actually something you see in HR departments pretty often. And what a title is trying to convey here is a couple of things. One, my position is global. I work with people all over the world in different Axis offices. I work in the communications department. And as a business partner, it really emphasizes that the job that I have is to advance our business objectives. As someone who works in, I would say, a pretty classic corporate communications environment, not old school, but kind of by the book, a lot of corporate comms and what that's like. So I can kind of get into that. A big shout out to Axis for having this PowerPoint slides ready to go for the template. It's got a little bit of fun to it, I guess. I also noticed as I switch from one slide to the next, it like lights up my screen in my face. But so yeah, current job, just to kind of set the table a little bit more, Axis Capital is an insurance company and reinsurance. So before you fall asleep on me, give me a minute to explain. You know, to me, like, you know, I should probably talk about this as well. I didn't plan to. I got this job through my PRSSA network, someone I met at PRSSA International Conference when I was a student. And his name is Joe Cohen. He was the PRSA chair the year that I was on the PRSSA national board. We struck up a conversation that year in Philadelphia, and we stayed in touch ever since. And I called him actually for some advice on a job interview I had at McDonald's. in the McDonald's corporate office, which is a major employer in Chicago. They got their big headquarters here. And Joe and I got to talking, and he actually introduced me to Axis at a deeper level and convinced me to join his interview process instead. And this is a job I ended up with, and it was a really great fit. So at an insurance company like Axis, we actually insure, like, think about it as like B2B insurance. So we'll do like, I work on cyber insurance. I work on renewable energy projects, like a major offshore wind farm that's getting put in off the coast of Carolina. How do they protect to stay connected to the power grid? How do they recover from a hurricane that might rip through? We do insurance for high-end museums like the Met Gala in New York, and all the fine art that's inside. We do political violence insurance and riot insurance, terrorism insurance. We do special insurance for people who full-time work from home, not just in a pandemic environment. We do the type of insurance you buy if you're Tesla and you're worried that Elon Musk might tweet something weird and your stock price will go in the tank. So it's really like, it's a pretty traditional business environment. And through that, my corporate comms job, I'm working on an integrated team of marketing and communications professionals to share messages to these key markets in the marketplace in which we sell to brokers who sell to the end insured. So we're really in a targeted market, but there's a ton of people who are willing to listen. So we've got to put a lot of messages out. So that's really exciting, I think, for me. I put on here because I started thinking about, like, oh, what do I do every day? And it's a lot of writing-based assignments, as you might expect. I am doing things like creating messages for our business leaders, our department heads, getting their key messages out. And often the way you do that is through media relations. I've also been around PR students long enough, since I was one of them, to know that a lot of people are turned off by the idea of media relations. You kind of get this like vision in your head about, you join an agency after college and they make you cold call reporters all day long, and like try to pitch them on some story that you don't really care about. And there's so much more to that in media relations. So I wanted to pause on it, because to me, when I think about the greater world of media relations and the work that I'm doing to get a message out through the media, that involves some pretty strategic thinking and some creativity to get a press release out and a cover letter on that can get a reporter's attention, that tells an effective narrative about your brand, but also in a way that gets people to cover it as news. It's coordinating interviews with reporters. It's writing quotes. It's working with senior executives for sign off on something maybe their subordinate wants to put out there. So I deal with our C-suite a lot, much more than anyone than your typical guy with 7 years of experience would have, because of these media relations work that I'm putting out. It's a lot of times we'll do email interviews. So a reporter will email us questions. I sit down with a senior business leader. They talk out what they want to say. I turn it into something that's appropriate and really, strategic sounding and ties back to some of the core values of the organization. So I get my ghostwriting hat on to do quotes and email interviews like that. Also developing talking points for when people do live interviews with reporters. So they've got a script they can follow. They've got not only their key messages, but how do they respond when a reporter asks a purposefully trick question. They bring up a topic that we don't want to talk about. How do we get out of it without sounding inappropriate, without sounding standoffish, without making them think, oh, there's something here, we got to dig in more. So there's a lot to that, and it can be really exciting. I think a great career development opportunity. So to everybody who's interested in careers, not just specifically in public relations, but in marketing and branding, in corporate communications or event planning or other parts that you have to speak, I think media relations is a lot more than maybe meets the eye at first blush. On top of that, of course, you've got social media. I'm writing messages there. I'm writing memos that go direct to our strategic partners. I write a lot of staff updates. So if we make a business change on a team, someone joins, someone leaves, we reorg a department, things like that. There's staff updates, and I'm meeting with our senior leaders to talk about what really happened, what we need to tell people, what's important for them to understand, so they still feel the appropriate amount of excitement or the appropriate amount of belief in the company when there are changes. And then I do some business-oriented stories for our company intranet too, about business successes. So it's a lot going on in my day-to-day. I think that's reflective of how my last week has gone. But I hope that kind of shows how a career in communications can be exciting. I didn't want to make another slide for this stuff, so I just put it on this one too. There's a couple other things. As Pritch mentioned, I've been on the PRSSA National Board of Directors for 2020 and last year as well. That's when I got a chance to serve again with Pritch for the second time. I started my career at Edelman, working exclusively in social media for consumer packaged goods, grocery store brands. I've also, then I left there. I worked for a company that owned shopping malls. It was an interesting transition, and now I work in financial services, and definitely a big advocate for people who want to live in Chicago after graduation. I think it's a great city, and we can really talk about that. Why? I mean, look, nothing compares to New York in the U.S. in terms of PR, but Chicago is certainly a really, really big, robust, and concentrated market. So I think it's pretty cool. One topic that I thought was really interesting, I thought maybe I'd just bring up, is the idea as you get into your career, as you plan for the future, the idea of like a specialist person versus a generalist. I tend to fall more in the generalist camp. And I don't know if that's something that you're starting to think about yet already, but it was certainly on my mind really fast as soon as I entered the job market, as soon as I was starting to seriously look at positions. Because, you plan, you're like, well, my dream job, it has X, Y, and Z to it. But you graduate college and you don't necessarily settle for anything less than your dream job. Hopefully you get something that is good and checks a couple of the boxes. But it's probably not going to check them all, right? So, you take what you can get, and you see these job applications and open positions, and you're like, wow, this could be really exciting. It doesn't have everything I want, but it's got this, and that's interesting, and that, or this one is all social media, and I never considered myself all social before. What does that mean for me in my career? Well, for me, being a generalist, as I often say, like jack of all trades, but you can't be the master of none either. So as you go and you have different experiences from your internships, from PRSA events, PRSSA events, PRSSA leadership opportunities, it starts to put together a little bit of a pattern. Now, for me, a lot of my internships were on social media, and then I got my first job in social media only, and I was worried that I was going to be like, how is anyone ever going to let me do anything other than social media? And that's cool and all, and I figured it's always going to be part of my career, but does it have to be the whole thing? And the answer to that is no, because there are a lot of evergreen skills that you pick up along the way that I talked about, that I apply in my job every day. Writing, critical thinking, problem solving, being someone that people generally enjoy being around, but like through your attitude and your outlook, being solutions oriented with your approach. So, through that, now, like in my job currently, I think it's really appreciated a lot of the times that I've got a strong social media background, but I've applied those fundamentals to branch out into different things. Like, you don't just start, my first job again was not just social media. I was the voice of Slim Jim. And you don't just get from doing Slim Jim Twitter to talking about risk mitigation on offshore wind farms in one step, but through a process, it's almost like a Plinko board. You can kind of navigate your way anywhere through the steps that you take in your career. That being said, some people find their passion and they really get into it with like a laser focus. Now that could be on social media, it could be on a particular sector, hospitality. It could be, you know, something like that. You really want to work in restaurants and you love communications. You want to be an expert on media relations and working, and you're the person that people turn to when they want like the impossible media pitch, because you've got great relationships down the road in your career, and they can rely on you when they need a placement in the New York Times, right? And there are ways that you can get there, and that can be really exciting. And I think as you move forward with the experiences you have, you'll figure out if that's an interesting way to start, but never feel like it's ever going to be too late to pivot. And I think that's just helpful context. So, you know, I kind of talk about, you know, how I kind of hit on how I've been shaped by my experience, but, you know, from the get-go, I was put into social, but I also picked up sort of like account management like skills through the way that I manage my schedule, doing PRSSA, doing class, doing internships, the way that I helped lead a PRSSA chapter by being on its executive board, or before I was on executive board, I led a subcommittee. Things like that really helped when I went and I tried to get a summer internship, so I could talk about some diverse experiences that I had. But ultimately, it was my network that got me my first big break, my first summer internship at a PR firm, and they were impressed that I had background on social and in PRSSA and managing a chapter, but it was because I made a good connection with someone in Charlotte, North Carolina, at a PRSSA conference that I went to a few months before, and he hired me to be the intern, and I worked on Allstate and their sponsorship of like college football mostly. So it was all and that was all traditional media. So it just kind of goes to show that you can prep all you want, but I think networking is a big part of that. So, you know, I feel like I've kind of talked a lot about me. So you probably already read the slides, so you can kind of see this like shaping of a career has kept me in a generalist path, but I just thought that'd be something interesting to cover. I thought the sunset slide from the Axis deck was a good one here to think about getting started on your job search and really entering the industry. So I figured I'd hit on a different topic and just sort of talk about some advice for breaking in for the first time. I really only know how to do it the way I did it, and the way a lot of my friends did when we were going through the same experience. And it was pretty much the same for a lot of us. In general, it starts with a little bit of soul searching. You know, you start to think about what your passions are. I kind of talked about that a minute ago with like understanding, like if you wanted to be a specialist, what does that mean? But when you start to identify your passions, you know, like where do you want to live? Is that important to you? You know, do you not care? Is that less important to you now that you can possibly be a remote employee and businesses are more comfortable with that? You know, do you want to be in certain industries? Do you want to be in-house? Do you want to be at an agency? Do you want to work on you know, risk mitigation? Do you want to sell Lucky Charms? You know, everybody's got PR, everyone's got comms people, so it's a wide world out there. Now, if nothing jumps out at you from that list, where you want to be, what industry, B2B, B2C, corporate, agency, like, you know, think about it a little more, and you'll start to probably see one or two. Maybe you're very specific and you've got a lot going on. Me, I wanted to be in Chicago. That was a big priority for me after graduation. I'm from Michigan, went to college in Michigan. Chicago, sort of the capital of the Midwest. That was far from home. Still could drive back if I needed to. And a great PR city. I wanted to be at an agency there, and particularly a big one. So I was identifying Ketchum, Edelman, Fleshman, Porter Novelli, Golan, and a bunch of others who are a little bit mid-sized, but players in the Chicago market. I'm like, okay, these are where I want to be. And I wanted to be on the biggest team, but you don't really have control over that. But yeah, that was my vision. I thought about it more, and I did not want to work on consumer packaged goods, and I didn't want to work on retail accounts, and maybe unless it was like really cool luxury stuff, like cool cars or glamorous watches, or I don't know, stuff like that. That would have been fine. But I wanted to work on a little bit more business oriented things. I didn't get everything I wanted, but I still had a great experience there. So you also think about considering, your values, in what you value in the experience that you would have. Like, do you want to be at a big firm, a big company? Do you want to work in a more of a small entrepreneurial, scrappy environment? Do you want to work on entertainment and fun products? Do you want to work on business? Do you want to work on more like social purpose oriented stuff? And the reason I mention all that is because when you do that type of soul searching and figure out what you're really interested in, it shapes your research and who you can look into. It helps the conversations that you have when you talk to the Pritches and the Sam Sims of the world, and people that you meet at conference. When you ask questions of people at Icon, after the breakout sessions during the Q&A, you start to actually develop a list of, these are the companies that I want to work for. These are the agencies and the offices of those agencies that I want to be. Now your search is less of a dream and more of a drive. And I think that really changed the search process for me, and how to find an internship and how to find a job. And for me, I always try to start really early. When I wanted a summer internship before my last year in college, that was talking to people, and by Thanksgiving, knowing that most of them, some of the GMs of the world, General Motors and other companies, they hire around then, but many can't predict their needs that far out. So it's not about saying, hey, would you hire me for this summer? It's about saying, I'd love to have a conversation, have an informational interview, learn more about your work, your company, and start to develop a better relationship with people there. So that's the long version of how I would sort of recommend getting started on the job search. You're gonna read most of this by the time I talk through it. I wanted to make this slide kind of as stark as possible and say like what I really think the opportunity in front of you is in PRSSA. I'm someone so I was national president, right? Like we mentioned, that's pretty unique. But by and large, the experience I had in PRSSA, while it had a couple of unique opportunities, high level, not unique. I joined, I got good experience, I was active in the chapter and used that to meet new people. Around my school, I've got great peers that I went to college with, people that I connected with at Twitter chats, people I met at in-person events when those are a thing. Stayed in touch. They became part of my network. I talked to professionals. They gave me their business card. They gave me their contact info. I actually followed up with them. They became part of my network. They became mentors. They became advisors. They became people I can just check in on once in a while. We don't have super strong ties, but we've got these weak ties, and I know they could help me out when needed. That is not unique to me. It is not unique to me at all. This happens to thousands of PRSSA members every year, but not tens of thousands. I mean, there's like 9,000 people in PRSSA. My experience, there's hundreds of us, if not 1,000 every year that have an experience just like that. And then they use what they've done to leverage good luck. I mean, the harder you work, the better luck you have. Like that's what you get out of it. I mean, if you're out there looking to find ways to lead in your chapter, and it doesn't mean you've got to be Stephen next year. There's a lot of ways that you can lead, and whether that be projects or committees or striving, next year, the year after, to be on the executive board, things like that. But it doesn't mean you've got to be elected to anything. find ways to lead in the chapter, to create quality relationships, to attend an icon that's coming to you at a really, really great affordable rate, to be proactive and keep in touch and read about the industry and the trends that are happening, to let people who allow you to be part of their network to actually enter your network by the effort level that you put in, and then keeping in touch so they stay in. I mean, I probably had conversations with close to 1,000 PR students in the last 10 years, counting the times when I was a student, and like good conversations. And sometimes we even have 2 good conversations. Very rarely do we have 3 good conversations, and hardly ever do we have 4 or more. And the reason is because a person who could be like maybe I'm someone who could be a mentor, maybe I'm someone who could just be part of their network, an advisor, someone who could help check in, give some advice once in a while. I stop reaching out, and that's fine. And I've done that to people too. Just over time, you can't keep in touch with them all. I'll tell you, I knew a guy really well for about 2 years who is like not super senior. He's about 10 years older than me. He's got some great experience, and he's like a dynamite guy who leads PR and social media for Taco Bell. And every time he posts on LinkedIn, I'm like, oh man, I should have stayed in touch with that guy. Like, how cool would that have been? Just to be able to check in with him once in a while and pick his brain. Like, what a cool job. He was someone who was in my network. I didn't keep after the relationship, and now he's not. And that's super disappointing. So that's a good example of that. But the opportunity you have in front of you, just being a PRSSA member, being in a great chapter, it is what you make of it. And if you actually try and do these things, I think you'll find success to come a lot easier. Oh, that's it. How'd I do on time? I was tracking myself. 25 minutes, not bad. Especially for a Zoom presentation, there's only so long these dulcet tones can go on before you may lose somebody. So like I said, there's a lot of things that I'm probably a little bit qualified to talk about. It's a big world out there when you start thinking of questions. So I couldn't help myself, so I thought of some for myself if you don't think of any. But I think with that, we can pop off mute, and I would also be curious. You don't have to ask a question if you're inspired to say something that's not a question and contribute to the discussion. I think that'd be really welcome too.
You guys can either take yourselves off mute to ask the questions, or feel free to put them in the chat and I can read them, or one of the other exec members can read them.
Hey, Brian. Okay, just like a quick question before my question. What part of Michigan are you from?
I am from the Upper Peninsula, Marquette, Michigan, up on Lake Superior, known as one of the snowiest places in the country.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I just wanted... because like all my family, they're from Michigan. They're from Holland.
I know where it is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's just so funny because every time my mom or we meet like Michigan people, we get so excited.
I like it.
Yeah. So the question I had, like, since you do work for a global company, I was just wondering how you stay culturally in tune with what's going on around the world.
Yeah, there's a couple of there's 2 things that jump off the bat to me. Like, everyone in my department is allowed to expense one news subscription service that's not related to the industry that we work in, insurance and reinsurance. So I used to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. I thought that was kind of helpful. It's certainly helpful in certain parts of our business, like management liability, stay in touch on the business side. I'd had that subscription for about a year, and I started talking to other colleagues about how they do it. And one, my manager and another really senior member on my team, they're both in London, and they really like The Economist. I found that to be really fascinating. as a publication. I think they've got a student discount, but that to me, like, is a way to sort of keep my finger on the pulse. Like, you know, we deal a lot with all sorts of international things. You know, if Iran's playing war games in the Straits of Hormuz, what does that do to the global maritime shipping industry? Because we're super involved in that. There's, you know, the major and deadly blast in Beirut, at the port of Beirut. What does that do not only for our property business that we might have insured there, but how does that also affect our maritime shipping abilities? So, you know, when there's political violence in Chile, what does that do for our business interruption and riot insurance? So to kind of keep my finger on the pulse, I found The Economist to be like super helpful. It's also interesting to get U.S. news written from a London perspective. But on top of that, there's also some cultural things that you just can't stay on top of for the first time. Like our Singapore office, there are certain ways that they like to do business. A lot of them are used to dealing with an international audience. It's known as like an Asian capital for insurance and reinsurance and being a really global hub. But so they're used to working with people outside of Asia. But then I have to rely on my colleagues who are more senior than me and business partners to make sure that I navigate that landscape respectfully when I'm working with a different culture.
Awesome, thank you.
Brian, we have 2 questions in the chat for you. The first is from Lauren, and she asks, how did you adjust to moving to a new city by yourself?
That's a great question. I'm glad someone asked it. I could go on and on about this. It could be its own presentation. It's tough in some regards. You know, I wanted to move to Chicago. I had some friends in Chicago, but you know, that was a real big help when I got my first apartment here. I signed a lease without even looking at it because I had a friend in the city go over it and, you know, make sure it looked like the pictures did. It can be really tough. You know, without having support like that. So, you know, when I think about moving to a new city after college, whether, you know, for you all, if that's, you know, that's around the area, I know Dallas isn't too far away. Obviously, Oklahoma City's close. But, you know, especially when you get outside of that quick, easy drive circle, there are a couple things you can do to adjust. I think being a member of PRSA isn't just some like sales pitch. It's really important. Almost all of the chapters have new professional sections, especially those in like, you know, all the major urban areas. So you get a network with people with a similar career as you, and you get to meet, I think by and large, really smart people who are your age, as well as possible mentors and advisors who are part of the regular part of the chapter. That's really helpful. You know, and sort of opportunity to meet, you know, new friends with shared experiences. That was really helpful for me. I also checked in with my network, you know, like who do you know who's in Chicago, who's in their first, you know, 6-8 years of their career when I first moved here, that I could, you know, meet up, get a coffee, get a beer, just kind of talk about their experience, learn more about the city. You know, I already have my place, but you know, you get a 12-month lease and you kind of start to think, all right, where's a better place to live? Where can I get more for my money? Where's a cooler place to live for only a little bit more? You know, things like that. So there's a lot to it, but I felt like checking in with my network to see who they knew in Chicago, on top of who I knew, was going to be really important. And investing and being a part of the PRSSA chapter was a great way to really start to fit into the fold of the fabric of the local PR community.
Brian, you've been involved with young professionals for new pros for a long time. Tell us a little bit more about what that part of PRSSA is about.
Yeah, it's a really great section of PRSSA. You know, I think on their website, somewhere it may say that they focus on, you know, it's a special vertical just for new professionals, as you may have guessed. So like I was saying, it may say on their website they focus on people in their first 5 years of their career. To be honest, it's more like the first 3. So it's really, really relevant when you first get out of school. You know, so from a national perspective, I think it costs $10 to be a member, and like 95% of the time they've got a promotion going on where they waive the $10. And that gives you, digital resources from the national level, like straight from PRSSA national section leadership. And I was on that committee for a few years, and it's a good opportunity to get involved or stay involved in PRSSA from a volunteer standpoint, if that's a passion of yours. And then on the local level, it's sort of like a spin-off of the chapter that's just for people in the first handful of years in their career. I think Chicago is a pretty normal version of that, and every other month we switched off between like I think for every 2 months that we did like a professional development speaker, then we did like just like a straight up mixer, and they usually did like the first half hour of any like new pros meeting was like a mixer with like snacks, or maybe like an agency, if an agency would host, and they'd get a couple of tubs of beer and wine out, and people could just kind of hang out for 30 minutes and then listen to a speaker for 45 minutes. It's a pretty cool opportunity. It really is, to get something that's like really relevant for people who are, I don't want to say just starting out, but really starting to like start out and find their way. I mean, after 3 years of experience, you do start to know quite a bit, and those meetings are still really helpful.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I see in the chat box there's another question about my favorite books, PR or not, that I would recommend. I think books are great. I wish I read more of them. During quarantine, I said I was going to read a bunch more. I've read a little more. Work tends to get in the way. So when you have time, I think 2 books that stand out to me based on maybe your interest or curiosity. Neither of them are very new. One's called Freakonomics, and that's just it's about the hidden side of everything. And it's just, to me, it was like a really intellectual way to like be entertained and scratch an itch about something that's interesting. It's a series of short stories. It's it's very famous. Many of you have probably heard of it, if not read part of it, or have seen a chapter somewhere like sort of published as a short story. But as a series, to me, it's just like, I think it helped me become a little bit more of a critical thinker in a way. How you look at what assumptions are made and why, and what happens when you dig in a little bit. So Freakonomics is a pretty cool book, and it's probably very cheap on Amazon since it's been around for a while. You can probably pick yourself up a gently used, respectable copy for a few bucks. Another book I really liked is called Never Eat Alone, and it's a book about networking. To me, it really flipped networking and the idea of it on its head, and changed it completely for me in what value you get out of networking. I can't decide if I should just leave the cliffhanger or tell you why. So let me think about it a little bit. But Never Eat Alone is a really good book.
I'll get that final question in the chat, Brian, from Kyle. Kyle said he was told by a former professor that a lot of PR professionals were working remote prior to the pandemic. He asked, will it be a bigger trend now and beyond the COVID era?
Yeah. Well, Kyle, I like that you put the question in 2 parts, now and beyond, because even though the situation is improving, we're certainly not through it yet. Although, by the way, I can tell you that we've got 15 global offices, or I don't know, you can see it on the slide there. Every dot's an Axis office, and everyone that's not in the US, including Bermuda and Toronto and Halifax, are all going to be open by the end of the month. So clearly the situation in the US is not as good as most places in the world. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I think you got to look at it in 2 parts. One, what the office is like when you have to be socially distanced to some degree, and it's like when I go to a restaurant. If you get up from your table for any reason, you have to put your mask on, and that's the Axis policy right now, and it's pretty standard for policies in other parts of the world when you're in the office. And when people don't feel comfortable taking the train into work, it's very different too, or a bus. So yeah, I think for a while, for at least the next 12 months, I think it'll be very flexible environments. Beyond that, when you start to get like truly post-COVID, whenever that may be, maybe as early as next summer, where it's really behind. I mean, like really behind us. Maybe it's the end of next year. Then I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think you'll start to see some pullback on a little bit of that flexibility, where you might see people in an environment where they're generally expected to be in the office twice a week, 3 days a week, and they get to pick which days. You may see companies who say, we need everybody, by and large, everybody should be in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The rest are up to you. I think before the pandemic, what was interesting in the workplace is that I've seen a lot of companies that were very flexible start to restrict that flexibility, because they felt like over a number of years, that flexibility was starting to erode the relationships that people make with the colleagues and the creativity that they bring to the workplace. So I guess right now, I wouldn't be surprised if 5-6 years from now, a lot starts to, not a ton, but to some degree, the tide goes back the other way. But certainly never the same. It'll never be. There's so many people, especially in traditional industries, that went to work 5 days a week in the office, and I don't think that that'll necessarily ever be like that again as a blanket assumption.
Brian, one word of advice for these young professionals.
Network.
Thank you.
Well, Brian, we want to thank you for speaking this evening. And if you don't mind, we'll give the members your email. So if they have any questions afterward, they can email questions. I'm sure they can all connect with you on LinkedIn as well, if that's a good platform for you.
It's a great platform for me. Please share my email address. It's something that I encourage. For anybody who's interested, we can keep the dialogue going. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to all things ahead for you. So it certainly doesn't have to be me, but I think it is important to get people who are mentors, or if that feels too formal, someone who's just more of a guide or a sounding board. And there are a ton of people out there who are willing to do that. I should also mention, especially because I'm a co-chair of this, but it's something that I utilized a lot when I was in PRSSA. It's a group called the Champions for PRSSA. And the Champions are a group of, I don't know, maybe 60, 70, 80 or so professionals in PR who are PRSA members, who match the dues of PRSSA every year as a way to fund scholarships, and get put in a directory to say, anybody from PRSSA can cold email me and reach out and say, hey, I found you in the Champions directory. I think you've got I'd be really interested to talk to you because I saw that you've done this in your career. Or I saw that you work, for a healthcare company. I saw that you work at this agency. I saw that you live in the Nashville market. And these people have literally signed up to say, you can email me out of the blue and I'll help. And that's a pretty cool thing. It's also an underutilized resource. So when you do it, because I know you all will, because it sounds so great and it's fantastic, you can also feel safe knowing that you're not part of this like onslaught of people that just keep reaching out. It's rarer than you might think for some reason. So really consider it. Just Google Champions for PRSSA. They've got their own microsite with the directory on it.
And I can send that information over to Steven to include in the email, because it is a really awesome source, and there's a lot of really awesome people that are more than willing to help. Yeah.
So like I said, in that you'll have my email address and my LinkedIn profile. So I'm happy to connect and keep the conversation going. But if not with me, find someone else and make it happen.
Well, if y'all don't jump on that invitation, then I'm going to be sorely concerned about the PRSSA chapter at OU. but I know that you will, because Brian's got a wealth of information that he's willing to share. And buddy, it was good to see you again. I wish we were in person.
Yeah, I do too, Pritch. I'll definitely look forward to the next time. I imagine the background will be slightly more entertaining than what you see here.
Well, love to have you join us. Thank you.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for inviting me. And talk soon, I hope.
Thank you, Brian. We appreciate it. Natalie, if you're ready with that attendance link. Natalie's about to put that link in the chat. If you guys all just fill that out for us, it takes 60 seconds max, just so we can know who's here, and get you added to the email list if you're not already on it. But other than that, don't have anything else for y'all tonight. Again, just thank you for coming out. Our next meeting will be 2 weeks from today, and we have another great speaker. Carly did a great job this semester. Our lineup of speakers is stellar, so you will not want to
amazing.
will not want to miss a meeting.
Right. I also want to thank Dean Kelly for joining us tonight, and our professional advisor, Sandra Longcrier. Thank you, Sandra, for joining us. I hope I didn't miss anybody else, but good meeting tonight. Nicely done, Carly and Stephen.
Thank you. And guys, remember, we will post the recording of this on our YouTube page, and we'll embed that on the website as well. So if you guys want to go back and hear all the great things that Brian had to say, or you forget the announcements, you can go to our website and the YouTube page. We'll try to get that up tomorrow. But thank you, everybody. Hope to see you guys at the next meeting.
Well done, y'all. Ciao.